Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Brewing. As always, it's presented by Blake the Attorney Mason. We've got so much to talk about. We got college basketball season underway. College football has the first rankings come out for the college football playoffs. We got Bengals and Bengals issues and so much more. We got our gambling segment where my best bet last week blew up in my face a little bit. I thought I was going to backdoor it, but I couldn't quite do that. And we've got my favorite portion of the podcast where you can ask me a question on any topic. Just go to the Xverse, hit up the hashtag Ask Skinny Anything. Rick, we got a lot to get to. Let's get to it.
Yeah, we've got a lot, Skinny. We'll start with the Bengals, who placed running back Zach Moss on injured reserve with a neck injury. Zach Taylor said the running back will likely miss the remainder of the season. And then they went out and they did something that they never do. They made an in-season trade, giving away a seventh-round pick to the Bears for running back Khalil Herbert. Let's start with that, Skinny. Is this move, Khalil Herbert, is it an addition to just have some insurance from a blocking perspective back there so Joe Burrow isn't getting killed, or is this a guy they think can be a weapon in the backfield?
No, I mean it's a backup body, and you have to have it. They don't have a lot of trust in Travion Williams. Kendall Milton just came up off the practice squad. This guy at least has some proven things he's done in the NFL as a runner and as a receiver. He's returned kicks. Yeah, and for a seventh-round pick, it makes sense. This move would not have been made. Let's be clear. If Zach Moss were healthy, this move would not have been made. But they made it, and they could have sat back and said, "Oh no, let's just go get another running back off of a practice squad of another team," just like they did with Kendall Milton. And suddenly you're full of practice squad running backs behind Chase Brown. I think Khalil Herbert can give you 5 to 8 touches a game, and maybe those will be some positive touches. Again, I just don't think they trust Travion. I like Travion. I don't think you can get him in heavy doses, but as a runner, I like him. I don't know about so much in the pass blocking department. But listen, what Chase Brown did this past Sunday is not sustainable, carrying it 27 times and catching it 5 times, 32 touches. He's a tough kid, but he was sitting in his locker after the game, Rick, and I was waiting to talk to him. And I give these guys their time, let's get you undressed and get a shirt on, all those things. And he just leaned back. And it was all he could do just to get his socks off. And so when we got done, I said, "You're that beat?" He goes, "I'm beat, man. I'm beat." And so he also took a shot to the ribs too. So that probably was affecting him a little bit. But just watching a guy struggle to get his socks off after the game because he's exhausted, you can do that some. You can't do that a ton.
Yeah, and he's not the biggest guy to begin with. I mean, that was one of the concerns, is pounding him between the tackles too often might not work in the NFL with him. But we'll see where that goes from here. I don't think there's a lot more to make of the running back situation until we see, like Khalil Herbert, they were talking about, he might even play as soon as Thursday night's game in Baltimore. Joe Burrow was saying, yeah, I mean, he's right next to me. I can just tell him what he needs to do on any given play. How much do you think we might see him in there?
A little bit, just a spell, maybe. Maybe they trust Travion, and Travion gets the first crack in the backup role. I mean, you usually have 3 backs up on game day. Last week, Kendall Milton got elevated from the practice squad to become the 3rd back. So now Herbert becomes, I guess, technically the 3rd back. But if they feel like he's grasped enough things, or whatever small package they have for him, I think you'll see him in there some. He did arrive on Tuesday before they held their Tuesday night practice. In fact, I was talking to Jermaine Burton. We'll get to that in a second, when he actually I think he was 2 lockers down, and I look over and he's got one of those wheelie, suitcases. He looked like he just wheeled himself off the plane and came right to the locker room and go sign his, or go talk with management and get himself squared away. So yeah, I think see him some. He's not going to be a difference maker.
Yeah, we'll talk about Jermaine Burton in a second, but a little bit more injury news. Eric All, the rookie tight end who seemed to be emerging for this team, has a torn ACL. He's gone for the rest of the year. And what's really disheartening about this injury is he's dealt with so many injuries throughout his college career prior to getting here.
Yeah, the same knee last year in October is the one he hurt at Iowa, and that's the one he rehabbed, came back. And it was weird when he caught the pass, and right before he went down, I even went, ooh, because you could just see something didn't look right. And then I thought, well, maybe he just slipped, and that's why. And then he gets up and goes right back down, and you realize this is not going to be good. It's unfortunate because he was becoming a real, not weapon on that offense, but a real key part of that offense with his blocking ability, the fact that he is a pretty nice pass catcher, the fact that it allows you to use Mike Gesicki in more of the receiver role, even if you go 2 tight ends, and that's now taken away, unfortunately. I guess the one part that the saving grace is the three tight ends that that you were counting on before the draft are still there: Tanner Hudson, Drew Sample, and Mike Gesicki, and they each kind of have their own role. It's just disappointing because I think Eric was one of those kids who he could do all of it. I mean, he could pass block, he could run block, he finished blocks, natural receiver, all the things you really want out of a tight end. You want him to be able to do all of those things. And just the sad human part of a kid who, busted his butt to come back and actually be, when they took him, Rick, I think I even said after the draft that it felt like the reason they took Tanner McLaughlin was that this was going to be a redshirt year for Eric All. Hard to believe he could come back that quickly from the knee. And he did, and he was effective and he was good. And so that's the human part of it, of just, knowing he went through that process to be ready to play. And now he's got to go through it again.
Yeah, that's really it. It's the human side for him. You feel bad for him because he was already starting to show some promise. And there is the upside of what he might have been able to come for this team. I think the fact that they do have a few more bodies in that tight end room that are capable, and the fact that he hadn't done a lot yet to this point. I mean, he had made a few plays here and there, but had done nothing to where you could say, yeah, this is a big loss for the Bengals at this point. But it is unfortunate for him and for what he might have been able to develop into down the road. And now you're just at the point of, you're like, how much trauma can this guy's body take? How many times can he keep coming back from these significant injuries and play at a high level?
Yeah, that's the thing for me. I mean, listen, he's a football player, right? He's gonna do what he needs to do to rehab and come back. But then it's the anxiety of, is this going to happen to me again, or when is this going to happen to me again? And I think that's the unfortunate part to this.
The Jermaine Burton situation has gotten interesting over the course of the last week, Skinny. Before that, it was a lot of just like fans clamoring for a guy that clearly didn't seem to be in the picture. But then after last week, we heard Zach Taylor and others talk about how they were going to get him more involved, how he was going to be a bigger part of the game plan going forward. And then it sounds like he was late to meetings later in the week, and he ends up as a healthy scratch on Sunday, doesn't get to play in the game. Do we have any confirmation on what actually happened? Was he just late to meetings, or?
No, that seems to be what the case was, but we don't have confirmation. And I do think it occurred both Friday and Saturday, not just one day, not just the Saturday. I think it occurred the Friday, and then the Saturday may have been the last straw, whatever that was. I got a chance to talk to him yesterday. It was not a very long conversation. I got a lot of stock answers of, I just got to be better. Charlie Goldsmith from the Inquirer, he and I were the ones talking to him. And when Charlie asked him what happened on Saturday, the answer was, I just got to be better. I mean, that just shows you that this is a different cat, man. And Jamar Chase, I thought, was really good yesterday in his podium time. Honest to a degree about, I've talked to this guy. I got nothing else to say. I mean, you're a grown man. It's time to grow up. He even talked about his own transgression back in his rookie year before the Ravens game. And then he went and balled out for 201 yards. And I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of it was kind of funny that I was able to play like that and do it. He goes, but then again, it's not funny. I should have done it, and I learned my lesson. And good for him. I mean, good for him for the honesty of it, and good for him for learning the lesson. But
Was he Chase also the one who said, I let my play apologize for it? Yeah, I didn't get up and apologize in front of the team.
Yeah, I thought that was a good answer, actually.
And that's exactly right. None of the grown men in there want to hear you get up and say, like, sorry, I'm supposed to show up on time. They all know that already. Show up and be a professional and play when you're called upon.
And I think he admitted he hasn't been late. I mean, he learned his lesson from that, and good for him for that. There's something wrong with Jermaine Burton, man. I don't know what it is, because you were given an opportunity. They were putting him in the game plan. Zach even said after the game, he was in the plan. I think he was going to get significant snaps. Maybe a 50-50 split with Yoshi, but he was going to get significant snaps. And then the transgression, whatever it was on Friday, I think he still was going to be in the plan. And then Saturday is like the final straw. Like, dude, if you're getting this opportunity, you can't do this. So something isn't wired right there. And that's something that honestly, I don't think we should take lightly here, that maybe he needs to get checked out. And I mean that sincerely, that if you just, that there's just something that's not clicking there. He's not normal. And that's unfortunate.
It seems that everyone around the team is saying he needs to grow up. And so it does sound like it's something as simple as he's not showing up on time.
That's easy to say, though. But
but I think there would be more concern, or there would be more interesting things being said by the guys in the locker room if he was like blowing up and losing his mind and they thought he was like off kilter in meetings or something, or if he was a problem in the locker room. It seems like it's like this guy just can't get out of his own way. He can't show up on time to things. He can't be a mature adult right now. And that can be fixed, I think. Now, it might be at some point like this guy just doesn't get it, and that clearly seems to be the case right now. Of course, we saw the picture floating around of him at the casino, looked to be in his pajamas. Was there any confirmation on if that, like, what was going on there? And like, guys are allowed to be at the casino for the record. Like, it's kind of weird when we get into this thing where we're taking pictures of guys out living their life, but you do have to think, if that was taken on one of the last couple of days when he was going through all of this, it almost seems like a cry for help of like, you don't know what to do with yourself, so you just locked yourself inside a casino all day, like to stay out of trouble, or what?
That's kind of my point, Rick. I think there is something there that is crying out for help, and I mean, the whole casino picture then makes you open the door of, is that where he is at all hours of the night? That's why he's not sleeping, or he gets in at 5 o'clock in the morning because of an all night gambling bender, and that's why he can't get out of bed. Is he chasing losses? Is it a one time thing? It opens all those questions up, and
and those might not even be fair at all, but the problem is that's what you do when you go out and you hang out in a casino when all this is going on, assuming that picture was taken within the last few days. I mean, I guess it could have been an old picture that's getting recirculated.
I don't know. He had the salute to service sweatshirt on from the game, or hoodie on from the game.
Oh, wow. I didn't even realize that. So it would seem to be, it had to be a recent picture then, if that's the case.
You'd think.
Skinny, do you think there's, I don't think so, but I saw this a little bit online. He made the comments last week when people were asking about him being a bigger part of the game plan. He said, like, hey, I can't put myself in the game. Like, I already should have been a bigger part of the game plan. Do you think there's any backlash to those comments potentially?
No, because a talent usurps all. They think he's a talent, and they're trying to get the most out of that talent. And listen, with the T. Higgins injury situation, so I said this on the podcast with Mike Petraglia, so I'll say it on this one too. I fully expected Zach after Sunday, it was going to be addressed, and it was addressed. I thought we were going to hear him announce a suspension, and then the light bulb clicked of, no, because if T can't play on Thursday, they're going to probably need this guy, and they're going to do everything they can to get him to the finish line to prepare and work and be ready to play in that game, because they're going to need him if T can't play. So can't play if you suspend him, and so here we are. We may find out tomorrow night he's inactive again because of something. I don't know. Or maybe he goes and he does ball out, catches 7 for 122 because he's a talent. And, it's just the weirdest situation. But I listen, we've been talking about this all year with this guy, right? Of fans want him on the field. And I've made the point of, obviously he's doing things that aren't endearing himself to the coaching staff, whether it be practice habits, whether it be asleep in meetings, as Al Michaels alluded to, whether it be, maybe being late to meetings, whatever. They're not playing him because they don't think he can play. They're not playing him because he's not doing the right things. Well, folks, now you know.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I'm glad that this happened, because it's not a good thing. I hope the guy's all right mentally and everything, but in some ways it does feel, for this team, this franchise, the fan base right now, it was almost good that these things came to light, that everyone understands, okay, it's not just like Zach Taylor has no clue what's going on and he refuses to put a talented player on the field. This guy is unreliable, and they can't get him to do the bare minimum to meet the requirements to get on the field when they desperately need more talent at his position. Where are you at with all of this now? Are you at the point where you're saying this is a huge miss by the Bengals scouting department, taking a major risk on a pick that they really couldn't afford to do that with? Or is this a guy that they just got to have some patience with and could end up still being a really nice get?
I think the latter, but I think the patience has to be wearing very thin at this point. Like, I mean, there can't be any more transgressions, man. They're just, you should be now at zero tolerance with this, because I think you've tolerated it probably too much. And I get it. This team's in the playoff hunt. They're battling. This is the NFL. You're paid to win games. You're not paid to teach a lesson. I mean, that's what high school athletics is teaching a lesson. This is the pros. And so I get it that in the perfect world, I guarantee you Zach Taylor would love to sit this guy for some games and either say you're suspended or just each week just go inactive. But you know what? Right now, your choices are this. If T. Higgins doesn't play, it's back to Yoshi, who's been meh, and it's Trenton Irwin, or it's Jermaine Burton with the potential to make a big play or two, right? What are you going to do?
Not great options right there.
No.
One thought on this Baltimore game, or on last week's game, because you guys did already recap that, you and Trags did, and I listened to all of that podcast. But it felt like coming out of that one, you were kind of like, okay, so what? The Raiders stink. That it's a meaningless win. Joe Burrow almost seemed to have the same sentiment of like, who cares? There's not much to be excited about after that game. We did what we, not even did what we were supposed to do. We just got a win, thankfully. I would push back a little bit on that because I don't think we've seen Joe play like that and this team completely control a game, even against the bad teams they've played so far this year. So while, yes, it doesn't say anything about their ability to beat the good teams left on their schedule, and they still have to prove a lot, I would say this was clearly a step in the right direction, seeing Joe be this otherworldly good without any of his extra weapons, by the way. He didn't have hardly any of the extra guys out there to help him, and he was this good, and they dominated the game.
Yeah, and let's not forget this. He threw 5 touchdown passes, right, to 4 different receivers. You know who one of them wasn't that didn't catch a touchdown pass?
Ja'Marr Chase.
Ja'Marr Chase. I mean, that's pretty darn good if you had that. That's a quarterback elevating people, which is what the great ones do. And to your point, I thought he did that. But I think from an overall standpoint, I get it. I got to get where he's coming from, the frustration that he realizes, guys, we did some good things. We didn't do enough good things. And if we don't do more good things against good teams, we're getting beat. That's what it felt like to me of we can't leave anything on the board because we don't trust our defense against good teams. We have to get it done. And I think that's kind of the frustration level that he was at.
And I get that. I agree with that perspective of it, but I was a little surprised almost from your and Trag's perspective that you guys seem to think that wasn't anything. You didn't seem positive at all about that performance. And I was like, I think they showed some things in that game that they really haven't shown all year, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I think the Raiders are awful. They're just.
I do too.
I think they're awful.
But the Bengals haven't dominated awful teams this year.
No, that's fair.
They lost the freaking Patriots, who are awful.
And listen, it's one of the first games. It's the first Bengal win I've gotten a chance to write this year. Where I could write the lead, after the third quarter.
Right.
That was a nice place to be for me, for goodness sakes. But no, I get it. But listen, I'm just a big show it to me. I mean, if this is going to be a team that we really take seriously for the games after the bye, split these next 2 because 9-8 may get you there. I mean, they're only a game out of the wild card at the moment, as goofy as that sounds. I mean, they're only 1 game out of it. And we've seen them at crossroads of seasons before. Even go back to Jamar's rookie year, the Super Bowl run. They were kind of scuffling around and all of a sudden got a couple of big wins that you didn't expect them to get and took off. The year that they ripped off the 10 straight victories, kind of scuffling around, and then they took off. This game Thursday, if you pull this off, I think it's a huge springboard. Then it is Katie bar the door because the games after the bye, I think all 6 of them are winnable. Then if you beat Baltimore with a kind of a mini bye weekend before you have to go out and play the Chargers, you have the confidence to go out and beat the Chargers. So just prove it to me, though, because against the good teams, Rick, a couple of them were close losses. I get it. Kansas City was right there. First Baltimore matchup was right there. Both were right there. But you're also 0-4 against teams that are quality teams on your schedule.
I totally agree with that part of it. They have to prove themselves against the good teams, and they'll get that opportunity again on Thursday at Baltimore. But again, to your point about we've seen them do this before. If I'm a Bengals fan right now, I'm looking for the signs. Like, this team is clearly flawed, but so was that team that went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, and they got hot, and Joe Burrow caught fire and took them there. I'm looking for signs that might be able to happen with this year's team. I think that game on Sunday, while it's a very small one, it's just a minor first step. Joe Burrow looked otherworldly good in that game without needing really anyone else to do it. He was just doing it by himself out there. That's a sign to me that maybe it's still in there with this team. Maybe with that guy back there at quarterback, you always have a chance still.
Yeah, I think the only issue, and if it was somebody, even a good team other than this Baltimore team, just because of my God almighty, are they so good on offense?
Yeah. Well, with that being said, what's the level of optimism, 1 through 10, that the Bengals can pull off a win here on Thursday night?
3, maybe a 2. I asked Lou Anarumo this yesterday about just kind of the I said, listen, I know it's apples and oranges here, but those great Kansas City offenses, the AFC Championship game matchups with them when they had Tyreek and they had all those other speed guys and they had Kelsey, and Mahomes has always been Mahomes. I'm sure they put a different stress, but what's the stress level with this? And he said it's a ton because there's nothing that they don't do well. The running back runs it, the quarterback runs it. You got all these speedy receivers. Oh yeah, and they added a guy who torched you earlier this year, Deontay Johnson, when he played for Carolina. He had 7 catches for 83 yards in that game. In fact, he's the guy that got Cam Taylor benched for a period of time in that game, and they've added him to the mix. man, oh man, it's just it's a really well-oiled offense. You just have to hope that they don't bring their A game on a night for whatever reason, commit a couple of ill-timed penalties. Somehow maybe Lamar throws a ball that's tipped and you get a pick and you steal a possession like that. Because honestly, you're not forcing them to punt very often, in my opinion.
No. And the first game between these two teams was an awesome game. It was back and forth. It was exciting. It ended up being 41-38 in overtime. Do you expect another shootout like that? Do you think it's going to be high scoring again?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if we'll get in that range, but I think we get high 20s, low 30s, to be honest with you. The Bengals have to score, in my opinion. They have to win this. I think you have to at least get to 30.
All right, let's switch gears over here to college football. Skinny, Ohio's, well, we'll talk about the bracket here in a second because they did reveal the first college football playoff rankings of the year, and we have our first look at what a possible bracket would look like, the 12-team bracket that's going to play out this year. But let's go into the games first. Ohio State won at Penn State 20-13. The Buckeyes will host Purdue at noon on Saturday. I think that the defense for Ohio State and the offensive line made a statement at the end of that game. They had the goal line stand, and then they were able to run out the clock with like over 4 minutes to go. They were in the shadow of their own end zone, got out of there, were able to run the ball successfully, and basically put the game away at that point. To me, that was what you wanted to see if you're an Ohio State fan. The defense hasn't been good in big moments. The offensive line has been much maligned here over the last few weeks. Both of them came through at the end of that game to put it away.
Yeah, I'm going to give more so credit to what the offense did coming off the goal line. I'm going to turn to the other side of this and tell you that James Franklin, whoever the play caller in that situation, was an absolute moron. That might have been the dumbest sequence of plays I've ever seen. You know what else they could have done?
And by the way, we're two guys who talked about the Bengals 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 sequence a week ago, right before this. So we know dumb play calling when we see it.
I mean, I don't know if you remember the 4th down play, right? Big old 71s lined up wide. You know what Ohio State didn't do?
Guard him.
They didn't cover him.
Why would you?
Well, why don't you just raise up and throw the ball to him?
I mean, was he eligible, first of all?
Yeah, because he went in motion. He had to be eligible.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Went in motion.
That formation was so ridiculous and so over the top cute in that moment where it's like, what are you doing? This isn't a defense that has been dominant all year or anything. Go ahead and prove you can fight and get that yard or two.
And I'll be honest with you. I mean, they had that direct snap to the big tight end who made a big run on that drive, took him down to the goal line. How about you direct snap to him 4 times? I bet you he'd plow his way in 4 times. You want to be cute? Be cute with that, with a bulldozer instead of being. And then the cutesiness of the flipping of the quarterback. And it's the James Franklin MO. A big game, he just can't get it done. Kudos to Ohio State. Again, I thought again. To your point, I mean, they did rise up and make the stand, and it still took something to do that. It's still man against man in the trenches there. Is who's going to win in that?
Think about how easily that game could have gone the other way there at the end.
No question.
They punch it in, tie game, and now who knows what happens.
Yeah, but the impressive part, though, to me was because Penn State still had timeouts left. You know, you force a 3 and out down there, you get it back with still plenty of time and probably good field position, and they just went zoom right past them and ran out the clock.
Yeah, I mean, that was impressive by the offensive line, especially because they've been getting crushed the last 2 weeks, and rightfully so because of the way they've played. But that was a big moment for them to step up. You bring up James Franklin, so yes, he's had that reputation of not being able to win the big game, but so has Ryan Day. This is playing a top 3 team on the road at their place. Now he's owned Penn State. Ohio State has owned Penn State, but where do you come out on that one now? Is this a massive road win for Ryan Day, or is this more about you just can't you get to win because it's James Franklin and you own Penn State? This one doesn't count the same way beating a Michigan would or beating Oregon would have.
I think it's a massive road win because of what I mean, can you imagine the narrative if they hadn't?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what makes it massive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if that's the thing for me. If he loses that game, then this Ohio State fan base is honestly probably done with him at that point. I don't know that they would come back from that one. How would you feel about James Franklin if you're a Penn State fan? Because I know they cannot win the big game, and they feel like they're stuck in the spot that they're in right now, where they're going to be ranked every year. They're top 10, top 15 good, but they're never going to be an actual threat to win the national championship. Is it fair to want more at Penn State?
No, it's not unfair to want more. But I don't think this is a situation that would call for a coaching change. I mean, he does have them in the mix, and maybe enough swings at being in the mix. It's the old mantra of, just keep making the playoffs, and at some point, hopefully you get hot and you make your run, just keeping a swing at it. And unfortunately, that the mantra under Marvin Lewis was that, and they made it 7 times and didn't go anywhere. But yeah, I mean, he's still going to probably get a second chance by this team getting in the college football playoff, right? Of winning a big game or two.
Yeah, he should. I mean, if you're a team that's at the very top of the sport, so in years that's been Alabama for a stretch, Georgia right now is probably that team. I think you can win a national championship just on your talent without an awesome quarterback, right? You don't have to have like the best of the best quarterback, and you can still win a national championship. For everybody else, and I would put Penn State definitely in this category, it feels like you have to marry competent coaching with elite quarterback play at some point. And to me, like, Penn State seems to have competent coaching. You can question that he can't win the big one, but they're ranked every year.
Listen, he won at Vanderbilt before this too. I don't like James Franklin. I just think he's a clown, but I do think he's a good football coach.
Yeah, and I just don't think if you move on from him, you're doing much better if you're Penn State right now, or getting someone that you'd feel more confident about.
Right.
And again, I think if, like you said, if you're top 10 every year, top 15 every year, one of these years you get an elite talented quarterback, a guy transfers from Georgia or Alabama, was backing somebody up, and he ends up being a Joe Burrow type of talent, you're going to have a chance to win a national championship at that point, but that's probably what it's going to take. All right, Kentucky lost to Tennessee 28-18. The Wildcats are on a bye this week.
Gave it the old college try, and I really appreciated that.
Well, they were right there in the fourth quarter.
Know.
They had it down to a one-score game multiple times with chances. Would you have been more frustrated or less frustrated with this team had they pulled that win out?
Oh no, I'm frustrated as it is. So here's why. You play a top 10 team in Tennessee, basically toe to toe. I mean, it's a 10-point margin in the end, but they played them toe to toe the whole game without a bunch of starters. I mean, they were down a ton of guys. Kentucky was. You win at a top 10 team at the time in Ole Miss. You have another team that's now number 2 or whatever the hell they are in the country, and you lose to him by 1 at home. All those signify to me you have some capability to play with the best in the country. And then you lose a string of games to Vandy at home, Florida on the road, and Auburn at home. That's the inexplicable part to me. That's the frustrating part to me.
Yeah, and I almost, had they won that game at Tennessee, I think that would have pissed me off more as a Kentucky fan, because I'm like, how could you throw this season away when you were good enough to win at Ole Miss and to beat this Tennessee team?
And almost beat Georgia.
Almost beat Georgia, and yet some of these other games, the Vanderbilt game, the South Carolina game, you were just nowhere to be found. That would be incredibly frustrating, but I understand it's already frustrating as it is. Cincinnati's coming off a bye. They didn't play this week. They'll host West Virginia at noon on Saturday, which brings us to the updated college football playoff rankings, the first one of this season. Number 1, Oregon. 2, Ohio State. 3, Georgia. 4, Miami. 5, Texas. 6, Penn State. 7, Tennessee, 8, Indiana, 9, BYU, Notre Dame is 10th, Alabama is 11th, Boise State's 12th, and the college football playoff bracket, Skinny. We have
I saw this last night briefly, and it is interesting, Rick.
Here's how it would look if you were to play the bracket out. The byes would go to Oregon, who would currently be the Big Ten champion, Georgia, who's projected as the SEC champion, Miami, the ACC, and BYU out of the Big 12. Those would be the 4 teams getting a first-round bye in the current 12-team bracket. And then the other matchups would set up like this. Number 12, Boise State at number 5, Ohio State. Number 11, Indiana at number 6, Texas. Number 10, Notre Dame at number 7, Tennessee. And number 9, Alabama at number 8, Penn State. Skinny, what were your initial thoughts when you saw this bracket for the first time?
So that's the whole thing, right? Ohio State's number 2 in the ranking, but they're number 5 on the seed line because of the 4 champions. I think that's extraordinarily interesting to me.
That's
why it pays to be a champion, right?
It pays to be a champion. It also adds some intrigue to these super conferences. We've been talking about how they're going to dominate, and they are. They're going to have more teams in than everyone else, but it also makes it interesting because, like, for instance, Ohio State could very well be the best team in the country right now, even though they are the 5th seed in this tournament. And that makes it very interesting when you start to play out. A team like BYU getting that bye and being sent into the second round, while Indiana at Texas and Notre Dame at Tennessee, and obviously Boise State maybe not in that same conversation, but Ohio State's having to play first-round games. That's really interesting to me. It's going to be incredibly compelling.
So I think we all expected this, right? But until you kind of see what it might look like as a season like this unfolds, then you go, yeah, give me this. This is what I wanted. This is exactly what I wanted out of all this.
Yeah. Well, we all thought it was going to look like maybe Ohio State, Georgia, I guess Miami would have still been in there, and then Texas or something from the Big 12, right? Like we did not expect that Oregon, Miami, and Miami maybe, but Oregon and BYU would be sneaking in to those bye spots, and they still might not when it's all said and done with. But just seeing it set up like that is pretty fun to think about what's ahead for us.
Yeah, and I think it'll make the conference championship games really good.
Yeah,
obviously,
definitely.
Obviously, that's what you're playing for at that point.
Yeah, a ton goes into that championship game now, whereas prior to this, you almost looked at it as like, it might not matter for some of these teams, right? All right, let's get into college basketball. Fun first night of college basketball around this area because we mentioned all the local teams played. You have Cincinnati who beat Arkansas Pine Bluff 109-54. We'll start with the Bearcats. They play 6 players in double figures. Seamus Lukosius led them with 20 points. Dan Skillings added 17 points and 11 rebounds. And one guy that really stood out to me, Connor Hickman, the Bradley transfer, knocked down 3 threes off the bench for them. That's, in my opinion, exactly what you're looking for out of that guy in that role.
I think that's what we talked about, when we did the preview stuff of you kind of set the lineup of how you expected it to be. It's kind of how it shook down. And with him coming off the bench, I think it's great that give me a sniper off the bench. And I think that's what they got in him. It shows they do have multiple weapons who can score. I don't know if Aziz is going to get you double figures many nights, but he did what he needed to do. I watched the first half of the game. I didn't think they were great on ball defensively early, but I thought they were really scrambling and playing hard. And then as it progressed, they just, they overwhelmed them with talent. But hey, a good first night for UC for sure.
Yeah, I'm not worried about their defense and their athleticism. I think they'll be fine in both of those areas. To me, it's
and it was just early. It was weird. It was just early in the game. I'm like, why are they getting drives on you? Why is this? And then who knows? Weird stuff happens early in games. Maybe you're feeling it out. But no, I'm with you in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, them scoring 109 points, them having 6 players in double figures, them getting 7 3-pointers off the bench. I mentioned Hickman hitting 3. Tyler Betsy had 2, the freshman. CJ Frederick hit 1, and then Rayvon Griffith got in at the end, and he made a 3-pointer from the corner. So I thought all of those things were the really positive takeaways from this, because those are the questions I have. Like, do you have enough offensive skill and firepower to go with all that athleticism on defense? And so far, so good in that regard. Xavier beat Texas Southern 78-69, and this one was a slog. The Musketeers trailed at halftime, trailed for basically the entire first half, eventually pulled in front and were able to squeak out the win. Only 4 Xavier players scored in this game at all. Not double figures, scored, period. The rest of the team was 0 for 16. Ryan Conwell led them with 21 points. He hit 5 3-pointers in this game. Think about that. They win this game by 9 over a team ranked outside the top 300, and they needed Ryan Conwell to hit 5 3-pointers to get that 9-point victory. This thing could have gone a much different way for Xavier had he not shown up and knocked down those shots. Fremantle had 19 points and 11 in his first game back after missing all of last season. That was a good sign for Xavier. He played 33 minutes, played as much as anyone, so he certainly looked fit and capable of handling the load they're putting on him. And then Davion McKnight had 19 and Dalen Swade had 14. Those were the only players that scored for Xavier in this game.
Yeah, I said last week, and I'm going to stand by this, although I'm going to contradict myself a little bit, that don't make snap judgments on a team, in November. But I now really worry that it doesn't look like there's much depth. I do think Jerome Hunter will work himself back into being a depth piece for this team. He didn't do a ton in this game, certainly statistically.
Yeah, he was 0 for 5 from the field.
But boy, after that game, I just don't feel very. I mean, they had 4 offensive rebounds against Texas Southern. I mean, that's it.
Yeah,
and I just don't know. And I just don't know how they guard against good teams. That's the other part.
Losing Lucina Traore to the ACL injury, Sean mentioned how big of a loss that was. And I think you saw it right away, just the lack of physicality and the lack of inside presence. I mean, Zach Fremantle played well, had the double-double, and yet you still came away feeling like they weren't big and tough enough inside for Big East play. Now, again, I don't think the Texas Southern game was like, it didn't cost them a ton in that one, but it will down the line when you get into Big East play. And that's definitely something I have my eye on. And I agree with you about the defense. I mean, there are times when you're running out lineups that defensively, Zach Fremantle's not a good defender. John Hughley is really struggling defensively right now. Trey Green and Dante Maddox still can't guard in your system, it doesn't seem like. So there are some definite question marks about how they're going to be able to defend. NKU went to Florida State. They played the Seminoles tough. They were within striking distance the whole game. It hovered around that like 8 to 14 point mark. Florida State only the biggest lead was 17 points, but it didn't stay there for long. D2 transfer Josh Dilling from Northern State came in, had 18 points to lead all scorers in this game for NKU. Randall Pettis had 12 points off the bench for the Norse. They were 17 of 23 at the free throw line. That was one positive takeaway I had. To play against a team that's this big, this athletic like Florida State, get to the free throw line that often, Skinny. Last year, they were 10-2 in games that they shot at least 17 free throws. And one of those games, one of the losses was an overtime game. So they didn't get to 17 free throws in regulation. I think this team getting to the free throw line that often against a team with that size and athleticism is a really good sign.
Yeah, I watched a little bit of that game too. I was flipping around. I had ESPN Plus up, and I had the Kentucky game on the background, listening on radio. I had all kinds of stuff going on Monday night, so I'm flipping around from all kinds of games.
It was beautiful, wasn't it?
It was kind of beautiful, but you can't get into a flow and get locked into watching when that happens. Unfortunately,
yeah, you don't need to when they're 40-point games.
That's a good point. But I mean, I thought NKU it was a nice showing, a very nice showing. I think it's a positive first step for them on the road against an ACC team. I don't think Florida State's great, but I think it was a good positive first step. You know, Sam Vincent didn't score a lot, and I think eventually he's going to get his when the time comes. So I thought it was nice. The one thing that did surprise me, because I was looking at the box score the next day, I didn't realize Hubie Pavorius was back playing.
Yeah, Hubie Pavorius last year had the shoulder injury before the season, ended up redshirting, missing the entire year, but he's a three-point specialist.
Yeah.
And honestly, when he checked into the game, there were a few moments where he was overwhelmed physically against that Florida State lineup, but he looked good and he was moving well, playing well out there for NKU. You know, you bring up about the point about Sam Vincent looking a little rusty. Dan Goretzka, their other Division II transfer who came up, had 4 turnovers in this game at the point guard position, was just overwhelmed by the pressure defense of Florida State, seeing it for the first time. I mean, really, as an NKU fan, I think the frustrating part of that game is you're within striking distance the whole game. You only lose by 12, and you come away thinking by your own standards, you really didn't play well.
Right.
I mean, you left a lot of points out on the floor. You had all those turnovers by your point guard, had to kind of adjust and play a different point guard on the fly. Josh Dilling, guy playing his first Division I basketball at all, going to an ACC school playing. Yeah, he goes from playing the wing to having to run the point guard because Dan Goretzka was struggling with turnovers, and he manages 18 points. So I think that was a really good sign for the Norse. Kentucky beat Wright State. You love to see that. 103-62. 11 of 24 from deep, Skinny. We talked about it in the exhibitions. I know Wright State's a Horizon League team, but it's still a Division I opponent, and they're going 11 of 24 from deep now. It's becoming more and more real with each shooting exhibition that they put on.
I'm disappointed they only got up 24 threes. I think that's the most disappointing part of that night. I mean, this is supposed to be a team getting 30 or so up per night, and they only get up 24, but that's the thing. I mean, they got a lot of guys that can shoot it. It'll be interesting to see when they get better competition, what those looks look like, how those looks are created, what the lineup rotation is when a game's on the line, all of those things. But it was exactly what you were hoping for if you were a Kentucky fan on night one. Of they were slinging it up there. They were moving their ball movement is really, really good. I don't think that's going to change no matter what the opponent is. Again, it's a matter of, will that ball movement lead to good looks because they're better athletes you're playing against. But boy, they do move the ball. And for a group of guys that have, only been together for a short period of time as a group, I mean, they seem to understand that I got a good shot. Oh, you got a great shot. And boy, that's something that usually comes with a lot of time together, and they've done it pretty quickly.
That's Mark Pope's strength as a coach, is getting his guys to play that way, getting them to share the ball and move it like that. The question for me was always going to be, would he be able to get the high enough level of athletes to play that way, recruit the type of guy you need at Kentucky to win national titles or compete for Final Fours while also playing that style and succeeding with it. So far, I mean, Otiga Owe looks great. He was 3 of 3 from deep, had 21 points, but he's
I heard some people say that they didn't think he was that kind of shooter either.
I didn't know he could shoot it like that. At least, I mean, we'll see what happens the rest of the year, but 3 for 3 from deep to start is obviously a good sign. And him scoring 21 points like that, looking like a prominent scoring option for them is a really good sign, I think, because he is a guy that brings some of those other things that we were talking about. And then Kobe Brea, he is a specialist shooter off the bench, but man, is he smooth with it, Skinny. He went 4 for 4 off the bench, had 18 points. He is going to be an absolute weapon for Mark Pope.
Yeah, I mean, they're deep, and that's why I think that's the good thing of, not everybody's going to be hitting on a night. Not everybody's going to be playing well on a night, and he's got multiple options he can go to. I just am interested to see, again, when it's better competition, what is maybe that main 8-guy rotation or even maybe 9-guy rotation that you go to. How does that shake itself out? Maybe it becomes an issue where there's one guy not getting minutes. You're like, wow, he's not getting as many minutes. But maybe that's how this thing shakes out. I guess that would be a good thing that you've got all these players to choose from.
I'm curious who that would be right now.
I don't
Because you're
know.
right. It's hard to trim it down to smaller than like a 10-man rotation out of the guys that they're playing. Like
Prisa?
That's honestly one of the guys you'd be looking at cutting if you're going down to 8 or 9. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that shakes out in terms of the roster, whether it gets shrunk over time. Louisville beat Morehead State 93-45. The Pat Kelsey era underway there. We don't typically talk about Louisville on a game-to-game basis, but with Pat Kelsey there being a local guy and with them changing of the guard, getting out of the turmoil they've been in the last few seasons, it's kind of interesting. A 93-45 win. USF transfer big man Kayshawn Pryor came off the bench to post 18 points, 12 rebounds, and 4 assists in just 20 minutes. They had 5 players in double figures. If nothing else, it was just a cool moment, I think, to see the Yum Center back excited for basketball again and cheering on their team instead of like 6 dudes and the ushers wearing paper bags over their head.
Yeah, say that score again, just the final score, just the final number. What was the final again?
45.
Yeah, and Morehead State comes to UC next.
Gonna be ugly.
Yeah.
Yeah. NKU is at Purdue on Friday. Louisville hosts Tennessee on Saturday. Other than that, some more meaningless games, bye games for the teams. Nothing too exciting there. Any other thoughts on college basketball before we move on to our pick'em?
I think, didn't Chris Mack win his debut too?
Chris Mack pulled off a win as an underdog against Southern Illinois in his opener.
Yeah. Scored 90 points, I think.
Yeah. And former Xavier player Lazar Djokovic is also playing for him. So
he starts. He didn't have a big stat line, but he does start.
Yeah, he's been dinged up a little bit in the preseason. They said doesn't quite have his legs under him yet, but they expect him to play a bigger role as the season goes on. So we'll keep an eye on all that stuff as we continue here. We'll talk more college basketball next week. Let's get into our pick'em segment, though. We were both 4-2 this past week with only 6 options to choose from. You would think, well, did you guys just bet the same exact thing? We actually did not, and we still ended up 4-2 somehow. So you are 36-30 now overall. I am 31-35. In terms of our best bet, I hit again with my Indiana -7.5 at Michigan State. That was an easy cover.
Golly, man. Honestly, I can't wait for that Ohio State game. I think they're legit. More than legit.
I do too. I said that last week, and you're like, no, I'm telling you, these guys are real.
I almost called you on Saturday. When Michigan State got up 10-0, I was going to call you and give you crap for that. And lo and behold, I had my best friend from high school was in from out of town for the weekend for the Bengals game, and I went to pick him up, and we were going to go meet some people for dinner on Saturday night. And I can get on 7:60 a.m. It's a Detroit station. They broadcast Michigan State games, so I kind of had a little action on that game myself. So I'm like, oh, I'll listen to that game going over. There's nothing else on at the moment. And so by the time I got in the car, drove to where I picked him up in Taylor Mill, it had gone from 10-0 to 14-10 Indiana, and Indiana driving. It happened quick. That fast. Yeah.
Yeah. It turned quick. You're kind of useless to me right now, Skinny, because you keep trying to tell me not to take my best bets every week that I'm getting right, but you don't say anything when I'm getting all of our other picks wrong with the local teams. You just let me pick the wrong side of that every time. No problem.
Yeah, that part's on you. And I did miss my best bet. I had Illinois twice. I had them getting either 1.5 or 2.5. Had them on the money line. They were down 22-17 with the ball, gave it up. Then they were down 25-17, driving to at least get me. I think I got 2.5. I think.
Yep.
Driving to at least get me to within the 2-point conversion. They were down along the 19-yard line, clicking on all cylinders. It looked like it was an easy, hey, it's going to come down to the 2-point conversion, whether I still am alive for the money line bet, and a blindside hit to the quarterback fumble, and Minnesota recovers game, set, match.
Yep. And hopefully you didn't listen to my secondary pick, because I did mention that I also like the over in the Air Force Army game. That would have been my second choice. It came nowhere close to hitting. So
listen, I had a early 5-team parlay on Saturday. I usually do them in time segments of the day. And that over did cost me, but I liked it too. So I'm not blaming you for that one. I kept watching that, thinking at any moment now, Army's going to bust a couple big plays, and here comes a turnover, and it just never, ever. It looked like, from honestly, that game looked like a 13-3 game should look like.
Yep. When we got through the second quarter and it looked the way it did, I said, oh no, this is like a real Service Academy game. They're really battling out here. This isn't like one side's going to run away. So I knew it wasn't good. Kentucky is on a bye this week. I think we mentioned that during our college football segment. So we've got Thursday night football, Simpsons broadcast. I know Skinny's going to be fired up for. He's DVRing that one to rewatch it when he gets home. 8:15 Bengals at Ravens. The Ravens are a 6.5-point favorite. The total is 52.5.
Why did they give you this? It's down to 5.5 in some places, and I'm trying to figure
Oh,
out
really?
why.
I saw
I don't.
6.5.
Yeah, no, it was 6.5. I think that's what it opened up at, Rick. But I just saw this morning I think it was down to 5.5. I mean, Lamar hasn't practiced again. It's a short week. He didn't practice some last week, and then he was able to play on Sunday and balled out. So that line makes me
FanDuel is still showing 6.5. I just
okay.
checked.
Okay. But also at 6.5, that just feels like they're screaming at you to take the Ravens. Less than a touchdown at home with this offense.
That's why I'm not going to do it, Skinny.
I'm not going to do it either. I'm going to go Baltimore. I'll go Baltimore 30, Bengals 27. So the Bengals and the over for me. And that's a big over number by NFL standards.
Big over. I just can't do it. I mean, I understand why it's that high in this game. I know what the last game looked like. I just can't pull the trigger on that number.
And I wish I had the trend. I think the trend of Thursday night unders is huge, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe that's right. Yeah, we should have pulled that up. But I have Ravens 28, Bengals 24. So I'm going right to the cusp of it staying under and the Bengals cover for me. So Bengals and under for me, Bengals and over for you. Saturday at noon, we've got West Virginia at Cincinnati. The Bearcats are a 4.5-point favorite. The total is 56.5.
Yeah, coming off that last bye, UC got a nice win on the road. West Virginia's been a weird up and down team this year.
Have been.
I think they keep this close. I do think UC wins it. I'll go UC 27, West Virginia 23.
27-23, you said?
Yep, UC 27-23.
Okay, so West Virginia covers then.
Yes.
And that would be the under at 50.
Just under. Yes.
Yeah. All right. I think Cincinnati's going to get this one done. You're right about West Virginia. They've hung tough in a lot of games. They've been up and down, but it seems like when they have a chance, like they played Pitt really well earlier this season. Yep. I think that's going to feel like the Cincinnati Pitt game or the West Virginia Pitt game. I think this is going to be a battle. It's going to be close, but I think Cincinnati at home finds a way to get it done by a touchdown. I'm going to go 34-27, UC and the over for me. Saturday at noon, we've got Purdue at Ohio State. 37.5, Skinny. That's the line. 53.5 is the total. I know Purdue stinks. Yep. And you know how I love these big lines, but man, that's a big one.
Ohio State 51, Purdue nothing.
Okay, I love it. 51-0, Ohio State and the under for you.
Yep.
And I'm going to go right under on the number as well. I'm going to go 45-7. So Ohio State just covers and it goes under.
I'm not going to expect you to look up the first half line of that game. Usually it's chopped in half-ish. So it's probably 20-ish. If it's 20-ish, they're going to be up 31-0 at the half, and then the dogs will be called off for the most part in the second half.
We actually have the first half spread right here. It is 21.5.
Ooh, it's 31-0 for me. I take the first half line and run with it.
Okay, all right.
Go buy the half point if you can buy the half point to 21.
There you go. Best bet. What do you got for us?
This is an odd one. It's a huge SEC matchup, and I'm gonna take the road favorite. I'm gonna take Georgia laying 2.5 at Ole Miss.
That's exactly what I got. I totally agree with you. I think they're gonna run over them here. I know Ole Miss scored 170 points last week or whatever it was.
Arkansas is awful.
Yeah, I think Georgia wins this one. Georgia's down to business. They had their early struggles.
Yes.
Yeah, it's time. I'm with you on that. I love that line at 2.5. I thought for sure it was going to be over 3 at least.
And it might be by the time it might be by the time it closes too. But right now,
jump on this while you're listening to it if you want to ride that.
Yeah, so that's funny.
All right, just a couple Ask Skinny Anything questions.
Let's do it.
If you could choose any of the current regional college basketball coaching situations as a fan, which would you choose? Who has the best setup? Not necessarily who is going to win the most games. For instance, Kentucky might win more, but not meet fan expectations.
Well, I guess that's the part of it there it is hard to meet fan expectations because even when you succeed, and honestly, I mean, I was a Cal detractor for many reasons, but Cal built that thing into a behemoth to where, and again, he bottomed out more than I thought he would ever bottom out, to be honest with you. But I mean, he built the fan expectations up so high, like it was guaranteed he was winning at least another national championship, if not 2 more national championships after the one he won. So I think that's the truth, but I still think it's the best situation. I mean, the resources, the tradition.
But I think the question is do you like Pope at Kentucky? Do you think he's the best guy out of all the other new hires?
I do. I think it's the right guy at the right time. I think he's going to embrace the all the things the job entails. Even the criticism, I think he wants to know, what are we not doing right? And if not, that's on me to fix it and make it right. I think this dude's got a chance to be a home run. I really do.
You might be winning me over on that. I didn't love the hire when they made it. It just felt like they so quickly went from talking about Dan Hurley and they were going to get the guy from Baylor,
Scott Drew.
They were going to get Scott Drew. And then it turned into Mark Pope like the same day when they missed out on those two guys. It felt like such a large jump to fall that far in terms of where he was at in the coaching hierarchy. That being said, everything's going really well so far, and they are really bought into this guy. He's saying all the right things. He really understands how to communicate with that fan base. He understands what is important and what isn't in Lexington and around UK basketball. So I think he's played it well. The problem comes at some point, Skinny, if he just kind of gets into that mediocre territory.
Sure.
Like if he stinks, it's easy to move on at Kentucky. If he's good, then obviously it's a home run. Everything's great. If he's just kind of mediocre, I could see this being a problem for Kentucky in the fact that there's going to be a large portion of the donors and administration that don't want to get rid of one of their own.
Yeah,
and so you get caught into hanging on to a guy too long, potentially. That would be my only concern with Mark Pope. But I think you're right. He might be the best situation right now Sean Miller's a pretty damn good one at Xavier because It feels like he's probably not anxious to leave Xavier. And at Xavier, if you have a coach like Sean Miller, that feels like a pretty high level guy.
And I hate to say, I just need to see more from Wes at this level. And I think that's fair, good or bad. I just need to see more.
Honestly, NKU's in a pretty damn good situation. The fact that they've kept Darren Horn this long and have a chance to keep him longer.
No, that's a good point. And
they've had a chance to win it every year since
every year. That's exactly right. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question though. That actually made me think more than I thought it would.
By the way, speaking of Scott Drew, that was a good start for his team this week.
Oh,
Gonzaga
although that poster dunk on Mark Few's kid
is
one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life.
It's so brutal.
I watched it at like 2:45 a.m. before I went to bed in my hotel in Tallahassee. And when I woke up at 5:30 a.m. for our early flight the next morning, it was the first thing I thought of. I just started laughing in my bed of I can't believe that actually happened.
That was insane, man.
If a genie gave you 3 wishes for Cincinnati sports, what would they be? This is our last question.
Because this fan base is so rabid, give the Bengals a Super Bowl win. That would be number 1. Number 2, because I want to take the baby step here. I don't want to ask the genie for too much. Get the Reds a playoff series win.
We're not even asking for a World Series for the Reds. Just get them a playoff win.
And number 3, because it's such a divided city in this regard when it comes to UC and Xavier, I'll let the genie decide which one he gets to a Final Four. I'll let the genie make that choice.
One of them has to go to a Final Four.
One of them goes to a Final Four. Yes.
Okay. I would. This is very easy for me. I'd go 2 NKU national championships and a Bengals Super Bowl.
I could do this one. I could do this one instead of trying to divide the college basketball. I'd like the genie to give us a decent indoor arena downtown.
Ooh. Yeah. Do you need an NBA team to come with it, or do you just need the arena?
I just need the arena. If an NBA team came, okay, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But I mean, don't forget, Rick, it wasn't too long ago, a handful of years ago, where I think Xavier would have been the host. They bid for the NCAA tournament and didn't get it because the facility sucks.
Yeah. Well, and Cincinnati was one of the sites, I think, for the NCAA tournament, maybe even the Final Four, that was selected as a potential down the road site, but it was done with the idea that they would have to renovate Heritage or US Bank Arena at the time.
Tear it down and start from scratch. Yeah, tear it down and start from scratch. I'm sorry, I cut you off because you gave 2. What were your answers again? I'm so sorry.
No, I got them out. It was 2 NKU national titles and a Super Bowl for the Bengals. Yeah. Very easy for me as a fan. I'm easy to please.
That's great. 2 NKU national titles. That would be a hell of a genie.
Realistic.
That would be a hell of a genie that could pull that off, my man.
Yeah. That's like the dude from Aladdin if he could get that done.
Yeah. No question.
All right. That's all I got.
I appreciate it very much. For Rick Boring, I'm Richard Skinner. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly potpourri edition, presented by Blake, the Attorney Maislin.